complete. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for EMBCA's Who Represents the Hellenic Diaspora, SAE and Current Hellenic Republic Legislation panel discussion. My name is Lou Katsos, EMBCA's president, founder, and I will be today's moderator for the panel discussion. Our distinguished panel includes Entrepreneur Stefanos Tamvakis, elected member of the board of directors of both the Alexander Onassis Public Benefit and Business Foundations, and former president of the Council of Hellenes Abroad, known as SAE. Today, unfortunately, we got a call from another panelist who is going to be Entrepreneur Tassos Terzidis, the president of Lion Design Hellas and former general secretary of the Federation of Pontian Societies of Greece, who is having certain medical issues, and we sent him our welcome, get well, naise kala. Don't worry about today's event, even though you called and said, you felt bad about it. Please do not feel bad, and our thoughts and prayers are with you right now. We also have author, poet Nicholas Alexiou, professor of sociology and director of Hellenic American Project at Queens College, genocide scholar Dr. Panayiotis Diamadis, and historian translator Dr. Marina Frangos. Discussions have taken place in the Hellenic Republic Parliament and legislation passed relating to the new recreated SAE, World Council of Greeks Abroad. The legislation for the Hellenic diaspora, Hellenic government outreach, or who was representing the diaspora in those discussions with Hellenic politicians around this legislation is not known by most Hellenes in the diaspora, nor has it appeared in, at least this nation, Hellenic American press. Who represents the Hellenic diaspora in the title is being asked rhetorically. It is the hope that as a transparent diaspora community service, this panel discussion will help demystify the current legislation and lead to more research and discussions on this very important topic. A little background: the Hellenic diaspora, the Homogenia, is one of the oldest and largest in the world, with a continued presence from Homeric times to the present, and has played an important role in Hellenic history. Currently, the total number of Hellenes abroad is uncertain, and depending on studies and definitions, with estimates varying from about 3 million or so to about 7 million worldwide. The lowest estimate is about 1.2 million regarding Americans, where I am at this current moment, and of Hellenic descent, with the highest estimate suggesting over 3 million. Assimilation and loss of the Hellenic language has influenced that definition in studies, including factors such as intermarriage, assimilation, and self-identification. The World Council of Hellenes Abroad, or SAE, was originally founded in 1995 in Thessaloniki, following the passing of Hellenic law. It was given an advisory role to the Hellenic state on matters relating to the Hellenic diaspora, or the Homogenia. It was anticipated to be the main body representing people of Hellenic ethnic descent living outside the boundaries of the Hellenic state. Its stated main goal was to, quote, bring together the Hellenes of the diaspora, creating a global network aimed at planning and materializing programs for the benefit of the Hellenic diaspora to be subsequently conveyed to the Hellenic state, thus fulfilling its role as an advisory consultative body. It had a brief history for a number of reasons which will be explored in this panel discussion. And at the peak, it did have youth camps and academic conferences, humanitarian projects, and political lobbying, coupled with some active participation of the diaspora. Over the last few years, there have been numerous discussions about restructuring it with new legislation. The new recreated SAE World Council of Hellenes Abroad legislation was passed in the Hellenic Parliament with 158 votes out of 300 on February 26, 2021. It was publicized in the past by numerous Hellenic governments that the new legislation would ensure transparency while maximizing engagement. I have the honor of presenting our panelists, and we're going to start with Stefanos Tamvakis. Stefanos is an entrepreneur from Alexandria. He studied business administration at Cambridge and holds an honorary doctorate from the Department of Public Administration at Pontian University. Since the 1970s, he has been involved with various activities in the Hellenic community of Alexandria, where he was elected to the board of directors of the charitable society Aeschylus Arion. In 1984, he was elected the community representative of the Hellenic community of Alexandria, and in 1990 was elected president of the community, a position he has held until 2002, after which he became honorary president. In 1995, he was elected vice president of the Council of Hellenes Abroad and coordinator for Asia and Africa, and subsequently unanimously re-elected 3 times. In December 2006, he was elected president of SAE, a position he held until 2012. From 2009 until 2011, he served on the board of directors of the Center of Hellenic Studies in Alexandria. He was awarded the Golden Cross of the Order of the Phoenix and decorated with the highest distinction of St. Mark's the Evangelist, with the High Cross of the Patriarchal rank of St. Sava, of which he is the Master of Ceremonies. Since 2003, he has been an elected member of the board of directors of both the Alexandria Onassis Public Benefit and Business Foundations. Welcome, Stefano, and thank you for giving us the honor of being with us today for this discussion.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you. That's my thank you. Good evening and good morning to all. Well, I will try to present to you as briefly as possible the evolution of the World Council for Hellenes Abroad from, as you said, from 1989 to today, including the latest law regarding the vote for Greeks abroad. Well, the SAE was founded in 1989 in the framework of the General Secretariat for Greeks Abroad, Genocide Scholar Dr, with the ability to express an opinion or make a suggestion in matters of government policy regarding Hellenism abroad, such as education, cultural identity, working relations, living conditions, repatriation, etc. The Council Founding Assembly took place in December 1995 in Thessaloniki, with the consent of the whole political world at that time. Greek American Andrew A. Athens was the Council's first president from 1995 to 2006. I'm honored to have worked closely with the late president, a great man, for 11 whole years. With him, I had the good fortune to to get to know the remarkable and active Hellenism of America. SAE included back then 4 geographical regions: United States of America, Europe, Oceania, and Asia, Africa. The distribution of representatives per organization was decided by the General Secretary for Greeks Abroad. Let be noted that this was not particularly to our advantage. In 2006, Parliament voted a law regarding the organization, operation, and capacity of the World Council for Hellenes Abroad, SAE. SAE was accordingly the advisor and supportive to the Greek state body, able to express an opinion and make suggestions. This period included 7 regions: Canada, United States of America, Central South America, the Europe countries of the former Soviet Union, Oceania, Far East, and Africa and the Near Middle East. Also significant at that time is the establishment of the youth network in each region. The 6th Assembly of SAE took place in December 2006. In this assembly, I had the honor to be elected as the president of SAE. Achievement of the first period, 2000 to 2006, Andrew Athens being president, included organization of regions for the first time, Greek abroad get to know each other, creation of network, youth, women, scientists, businessmen, culture, etc., organization of meeting, recording, starting problems and issues, establishment of medical centers by the president of SAE in states for the former USSR with the help of sponsors, support of educational program in many countries. 5 regular assemblies were held in Thessaloniki and regional assemblies were held in different countries. Reduction of military service for the Greeks living abroad from 6 to 3 months with the possibility of partial fulfillment following a recommendation by the Council Board to the Ministry of National Defense. Achievements of the second period, 2007 to 2012, creation of the 7th region, including regional assemblies and operating regulations for each region, establishment of youth networks in each region and organization of a youth conference in Thessaloniki, international youth initiative for the return of the Parthenon sculptures, presentation of annual report to Parliament followed by 3-day debate, creation of Greek language learning center for returnees in Thessaloniki within the support of the General Secretariat for Youth, research into SAE's self-financing with own resources, establishment of the civil non-profit organization, NGO, for this purpose, attempt to work with the Postal Saving Bank, Tachydromικό Ταμευτήριο, in order to create an e-banking system for Greek abroad. Also attempt to create an arc of Hellenism in Thessaloniki. Submission of funding was the ΕΣΠΑ, Εταιρικό Σύμφωνο για Πλαίσιο Ανάπτυξης, and EU. Now I'm coming to the position of SAE to the vote. Through our assemblies, we had repeatedly and clearly stated the issue of the vote of the Greek register in the electoral rolls, wishing to vote in their place of residence. First, create expatriate peripheries so that the expatriates may elect their own representatives. Second, the possibility of exercising the right to vote in parliamentary election by ballot and or by letter vote. In 1999, the vote which was passed by 285 MPs of the Greek Parliament, there is an unpleasant surprise, I can say, for Hellenes everywhere. Conditions are set to have a total of 2 years of residence in Greece in the last 35 years and to have filled a current tax return or of the previous tax year, which exclude the vast majority of Greeks and especially the first and second generation of expatriates who left Greece, went abroad, formed communities and associations, organized parades and events, embraced the church, and made a titanic struggle to preserve the language, customs, and traditions of our homeland abroad. Now I'm coming nowadays. On February 2021, Law 4781 was passed by Parliament concerning the reopening of SAE. The structure and the body of the new SAE allow me, for the sake of our today's discussion, to call it the new SAE. The representatives of the expatriate Hellenism per region are elected through internal procedure carried out by their representative organization and entities. Therefore, the organization is done from the bottom to the top and not vice versa as it happened till now. Specifically, the government does not determine which organization and how many from each organization would participate in the assemblies. The organizations themselves decide the organization of SAE. It is a self-organization. Key points for the disengagement of the original diaspora from the current Greek government state are the possibility of wider representation of the Greek community beyond organizations that already exist and represent a percentage of the Greek community, to be represented by other entities such as scientists, artists, businessmen, young people, mainly the new generation after 2010, which cannot be integrated into existing expatriate organizations. The resources for the operation of SAE comes from own resources, self-financing, and not from any state budget. The number of representatives per region are Region of Canada, 6 representatives, USA region, 10 representatives, Region of Central and South America, 5, Region of Europe countries, 9, Region of Black Sea and Central Asia, 6, Region of Oceania, Far East, 9, Region of Africa, Near Middle East countries, 5. The new SAE is constituted by the board, the General Assembly called Kinon, common. The above 5 representatives of the region participate as regular members in the General Assembly with the right to vote. Also participating with no right to vote, prominent expatriates in scientific, business, technology, military, ecclesiastical, cultural and social sectors, Philhellenes, representatives of the Ecumenical Patriarch and Presbyterian Patriarchates, Presbygenή Patriarchia, and the POMAC and PSECA, the 2 well-known Cypriot organizations. In order for the General Assembly to be assembled for the first time, at least 30 members from the last 4 regions must have been appointed and officially notified. The General Assembly elects its president in the first meeting and decides its provisional rules of procedure until the Council official rules of operation are voted. My personal opinion is that the power of Hellenism all over the world is the one that represents the Greek abroad. The church, the Greek diaspora, the new generation, the youth, culture, language, Greek education form the components of the strength that reflects the Greek diaspora. Most of all, I consider it important that the new law gives an organized Hellenism, that is the Greek forums, the opportunity to participate. It gives the new entities the right to participate, act in a new modern way. If we manage to be financially self-sufficient, and if we can organize the new SAE ourselves by developing the regions, giving priority to young people, setting different and cutting-edge goals, while at the same time being able to cope with the current demanding times, only then will the new SAE be able to have a say and play a part in what we call global Hellenism. Thank you for your kind attention.
Stefano, thank you so much for that. It was very helpful for those in particular who have not seen the legislation. As we know, I believe, it's in the Hellenic language, obviously, but I'm not sure if it was ever translated into English, nor distributed for anyone in the diaspora to see who in fact may have various difficulties or various understandings of the Hellenic language. But thank you so much for that. It was very interesting. Thank you.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Our next panelist that I'd like to introduce is Professor Nicholas Alexiou, a good friend of EMBCA's. Obviously, he's also one of our vice presidents, and we've done many events together. Obviously over the years. He was born in Volos, where he studied economics. He has received his MA degree in sociology from Queens College at the City University of New York, and a PhD also from its graduate center. He has taught at the Department of Sociology at Queens College for a number of years, and he has received the President's Award for Excellence in Teaching. His fields of interest are social and political sociology, ethnic studies, and research. He has established the first archive, library, and museum for the Hellenes of New York, and he is the director of research of the Hellenic American Project at Queens College. Also, a well-known contemporary poet and an artist. He is the author of 6 books of poetry, and many of his poems have been published in the Hellenic and American journals and anthologies. He is a member of the Hellenic Authors Association in Hellas, and the Hellenic American Writers Guild Association here in New York. Part of the reason why we're having this event actually has to do with Nikos, because we had an event. We've had a number of events, by the way, relating to the 200th anniversary of the Hellenic Revolution. We started our events about last year. They've been very well received. And one of the recent ones was the legacy of the Hellenic diaspora and its effects on the revolution of 1821. And during that event, or around that event time, when the legislation actually was in front of Parliament, I did get a call from Nico. And Nico said, "Hey, Lou, this is what's happening." And I said, "Hey, Nico, why don't we have an event on the legislation?" And here we are today. Nico, thank you for coming. And please.
Thank you very much, Lou. And I'm very happy to see the fellow panelists. Each one has their unique contributions, and I'm sure we're going to have a nice presentation and debates, of course. From what we heard just now from the former president of SAE, Stefanos Tamvakis, is that although Greece has a long history of immigration and diasporas around the world, we're still unhappy, right? The new legislation and the vote and all the latest developments regarding the Greeks abroad, we're still unhappy. And this is the case for the United States, the Greeks in America. This year coincides with 120 years of continuous presence in America, with many contributions within the American society and, of course, in support of Greece. So why we're so unhappy, and why it seems that the new legislation of SAE in this phase or the previous one somehow did not succeed, or it looks like it's going to fail again. Of course, one thing is that it's not rooted within the communities, at least for the United States. But it's not rooted within the communities because it is a structural problem. This is the nature of the Greek American communities, and I would like to give an overall overview why we are here in this. I don't know if Costa is ready to play the slides, in a faster way, so we can come to the conclusion. Go, Costa. Yes, continue. So as I said, next. So we see the various periods of immigration. Definitely, the immigration to the United States, it is a phenomenon of the 1900s of the 20th century, the beginning of the previous century, in a massive scale. Of course, we have Greeks before that, sporadically as individuals, small groups, but the massive immigration happened between 1900s and 1924. When the Greeks came at that time, and this is important to remember now because we're going to see it again later in our discussion. When the Greeks came to the United States in 1900s, Greece still was not completely fulfilled, or achieved its current borders. Don't forget that Thessaloniki, one of the largest cities after Athens, the second largest city after Athens, was liberated during the Balkan Wars in 1912 and 13. A lot of the islands were returned to Greece after the Second World War, like the Council, for example, in 1947, the Ionian, the union with Crete, etc. So what I'm trying to say is that we have a Greece that established its current borders in different historical periods. So when the Greeks came from a small country of 3-4 million, 500,000 reached the shores of America at that time, it was a mass exodus. Costa, go on. For people who want to see the specific years, I have it here. We had a small immigration during the crisis years, but in general was people who either had a green card or they're already citizens and they return because Greece is a member of the European Union, so to go to Europe was easier than coming to America. In the next one, at this moment, the census gives us 1.3 million Americans of Greek descent or identify themselves as Greeks. So what is our patterns of settlement in the States? Basically, urban centers. Usually, New York City, New York State was, the preferable point of disembarkation and settlement. Of course, we have settlement in all other regions of the states. This is a historical fact, but we have in the Midwest, in the South, etc. But one of the major characteristics that it was obvious in the way we form our communities, it was on family, on kinship, or what we call sociology primordial ties. Of course, the church is a very strong institution with hierarchies and some kind of design and institutional mechanism was very strong and present since the beginning. We have the four major institutions that the immigrants build their communities. The church, and all those four institutions are in major crisis or in the middle of major changes. And either they have to transform themselves along with the new changes, or new ones have to develop. So as Lou pointed earlier, we have high rates of intermarriage. The church gives about 80% of the marriages within the church are mixed marriages. So we see a tremendous change of church going. Also, the language issue, it was a big problem that many Greeks wanted to have the liturgy in Greek. Now it is basically in English or half and half. It is an issue also. The second major institution or process or pattern that the Greek American was built upon was the ethnic enclaves. Astoria is the symbol of Greek immigration to the States in the 20th century. And it is one of the largest cities with Greek population outside of Greece for a long time. This is no longer the case because ethnic enclaves do not survive anymore. They don't exist anymore in most major US states and places, because the Greek Americans have shown a tremendous upward socioeconomic mobility, and they have moved to various other areas with other groups and to the suburbia, etc. The third institution that supported the Greek American community was the various ethnic or local associations, ethnotopiki σύλλογοι. Of course, besides having the the minor scale also they have created the pan types, as I call them, right? The Panayiotis, the Panthesali, etc. But also there is a tremendous decrease of memberships, especially the absence of youth to most of the associations is very obvious, except 2 or 3 larger communities. Most of ethnic associations, they have very low membership and an obvious absence of young people who are American born. Of course, the media in general and the role of the Greek press also in decline. Unlike other ethnic groups in the States and New York, the Hispanic press or the Hispanic TV and networks are in the increase. However, the Greek American media networks are in decline. As we're going to see briefly and faster, Costa, in the next one, you see what we just said. Between 24, when the anti-immigration laws were imposed in the States, we have a decline of immigration. It opened again in the 60s. In the next one, we'll see the mobilization of Greeks within a generation. If you see the upper here, Astoria was more blue, around Astoria or Brooklyn, and then the previous, in the previous census, if you go to the next slide, you see the spread more to the suburbia. So this is, as we said before, the socio-economic mobility and therefore residential mobility. So no more ethnic enclaves. In the next slide, we'll see some of the difficulties of communication between Homogeneia and the Greek state. First of all, the Greek state never managed to have a serious political lobby in the United States, unlike other countries. Of course, everyone has is eager, different individuals or groups in the States, because of their high sense of ethnic identity, of feeling Greek, and wanted to support Greece. Either they are self-appointed or they take initiatives to present what they think it is the national interest of Greece. Sometimes beyond replacing the policies of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Greece, to go to the White House or to pressure politicians for the interest, for the national interest of Greece. So ethnic identity and participation to national issues in favor of Greece, it is one of the ultimate indicators for ethnic identity. The Greek state has another problem with its relationship and association with the Greek church. We are probably the only European country that there's no clear separation between the state and the church, and especially in the States, the role and the relationship of the ecumenical patriarchy and the Greek American communities here. Of course, the church is a very serious and a very important institution, but at the same time, the Greek state, because it is the nature to be such an important institution and massive and throughout history, the Greek state recognizes as a political actor also as a representative of the Greeks abroad, the church in the United States. Many often, the archbishops here in the States, they proclaim themselves as representatives of the Greeks abroad. So ethnic identity is to serve the interests of Greece, as we said, is the ultimate indicator, and also it is an indicator that Greek Americans have been accepted by the American society. So they have a role to play to influence American policies favoring Greece. Of course, there is what we call the victim diaspora, and many ethnic associations, they have that in their constitutions, because when they are formed 100 years ago, it was a serious problem, either from Asia Minor or what we call Βόρειο Ήπειρο, but nevertheless, the United Nations and everybody else, they call it South Albania, and this is a totally different issue and understanding if those lands need to be liberated, if those lands are lost. So you have this victim sense of forming the ethnic associations, and therefore under this perspective, the nationalistic, or what represents the interest of those ethnic associations is to promote or to lobby for the liberation of the lost lands. In the next one, the latest example was, of course, the Macedonian question, right? That another point of conflict, not only in Greece, but also in the United States. In conclusion, we see that the Greeks in the States, although they have 120 years of continuous presence and major achievements, of course, it is a small group in comparison to other European ethnic groups. It's only 1.3.4 million, so it's not a large number, but nevertheless, it's a very vibrant and important ethnic group. Even the word diaspora is very problematic. Within the sociological tradition, it is a debate since I think the 70s, if we are a diaspora or we are an ethnic group among the others here. Yeah, and that has an ideological turn if we have time to discuss it later in other discussion. Of course, the Greeks, we are probably the only European country, perhaps with exception of the Italians, that we immigrated massive immigration within the same century. No other group had this historical experience. However, by creating or having or experiencing a second mass wave with different characteristics than the first, the Greek American communities in the States had the chance to replenish themselves and maintain concepts or feelings of ethnic identity or cultural identity to higher levels than other European groups. For example, the Germans or the Italians, that they have assimilated more than the Greek Americans. And the reason is because we had the chance to replenish our populations. The immigrant institutions, as we said, are all in crisis. And of course, because they were formed for a very good reason to serve the interest of the immigrant generation, now because we have a tremendous demographical transition for the first time in the States, the American-born generations, the American-born group is numerically larger than the Greek-born, the foreign-born. So the institutions that were built by the immigrant generation, they are not compatible with the needs, the visions, and the lives of the American-born. So that's why I said in the beginning, either they need to transform themselves or the new ones, at some point, they have to emerge. At the same time, we have the underdevelopment and atrophy of the secular sector of political institutions for various reasons. Greece has played a role into that. And also, as we explained, that in the States, we never had the chance to develop political institutions into a high degree. So Greeks in America, they are between the concept of what we call a state and what we call a nation, an ethnos. The majority of Greeks who came to America, they came from a stateless place. In the case of Asia Minor, in the case of Dodecanissa, that they succeeded to Greece after the Second War. In different historical periods, Greece as a state did not exist with the population who immigrated. So we never had a sense of settled government. It was mostly primordial and mostly tribal or local interests. So the state themselves, the Greek state themselves, had an unfortunate attitude or behavior towards the Greeks abroad in all historical periods. Either they came from Asia Minor to Greece, the famous Turkospori, or the recent immigration from the former Soviet Union. Again, it was very difficult to apply policies of inclusion that easily. So it was always a case of central bureaucratic apparatus of the Greek state, and the concept of ethnos, of course, feeling Greek, but when dealing as a citizen was and still is very difficult. With Lou, we had a discussion that even now in the 21st century, the majority of Greek Americans have a difficulty to declare dual citizenship. It's such a difficult case to identify or legally go through the bureaucracies of the Greek state and declare the Greek citizenship. We know stories of people that they fight with the Greek state for at least 10 years, fight in quotes, right, go through the channels. So you see the difficulties of the bureaucratic apparatus. The demographic change is an important issue, and of course there are political and structural failures of the Greek state to develop a visionary and viable policy towards the Greeks abroad. So the new SAE design, I think, like the previous speaker, that fails short in many respects, and there is a need of consensus. But consensus requires dialogue, public open dialogue with different institutions, individuals, and groups, and definitely requires, of course, compromises. In conclusion, to the rhetorical question that Lou has raised, if you go to the next one, at the moment, who represents the Hellenic diaspora in the States, except the church? Well, as they say in Broadway, anything goes, everybody and nobody. Thank you.
Nico, thanks so much. And I'm going to introduce the next panelist in a second, but I will say, in my opinion, right now, there has never been a time when ethnic identity was as strong as it is right now. In the U.S., there's a tremendous identification with the Hellenic Republic. In terms of southern Albania, Nico, I call it Northern Epirus. Anyway.
The different perspectives, yeah, of course.
Well, don't forget, Nico, I'm tribal. I'm from the tribes, so I understand the tribal, the tribal discussion.
And we have to discuss them at some point.
No, we'll have separate panel discussions on these issues because they're very important. Our next panelist, quite frankly, he's an amazing individual. He's in Australia. He came on board, like 1:30 in the evening, quite frankly. He logged on, and we thank Dr. Panayiotis Diamadis very much for being with us today. Dr. Diamadis was born and raised in Sydney, Australia, to migrants from Yanina And by the way, Panayiotis, we've had many panel discussions on Yanina, in particular around the revolution, Ali Pasha, and all the rest of that, and the Suliotes, and obviously from also the Northern Epirotes, and Agrignon in mainland Hellas. He was educated at the University of Sydney, from which he graduated with a PhD in genocide studies. His research focuses on Australian Hellenic relationships, particularly around the period of the genocide of the Hellenes from 1914 to 1924. Mr. Diamadis has been an active member of the Australian Hellenic community for 33 years, starting out in a folkloric dance group. He has participated in SAE, Oceania international conferences, and served for many years on the Australian Hellenic Council. Thank you, Panayiotis, for being with us. And sorry we kept you up, but it's great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Small correction. It was 20 to 3 in the morning when I logged on.
Okay.
It's rather unusual to be up at this hour, but as you in the States will realize, we're 15 hours ahead of you. So with Greece, we're only 7 hours different. No, 8 hours difference at the moment. The time zones are actually really important to our conversation, our discussion, simply because not only are you guys entering summer, we're entering winter. So when you in the Northern Hemisphere have one concept, one perception of what the situation is at the moment, we are different. You are aligned with the center. Let's use the phrases center and periphery. You're aligned with the center far better than we are, simply because of the distance. You are able to go. You share the summer with Greece, so therefore you guys from the States, from Western Europe, can go there, have conversations with the political powers, whoever they are in Athens, or in Thessaloniki, or in Yanina, or in anywhere, far easier than we can. Whereas our summer is the middle of your winter. So when we're on holidays, you're all at work. Historically, the Australian community is not very far behind. I say about a decade, maybe 20 years behind the United States. Our oldest institution is actually the church. Our first church was 1897 here in Sydney. It's still operating as a church under the Archdiocese, Yagia Triada. So we have a very similar relationship with the United States, and in many ways, this is a conversation for another time, American culture came to Australia through the Hellenic networks, not only through Hellenes who migrated from the mainland, from the Batrida to the United States and then to Australia, or through family networks when they came to Australia through family networks in the United States. And the classic example is AHEPA. Amongst other things, I serve as Secretary of AHEPA in New South Wales, which doesn't say much to the Americans, but New South Wales is the whole of New England plus. Population-wise, we're only about 5 million, so not even New York. But geographically, for me to cross from east to west New South Wales, it's about a 7-hour drive, and that's within one state. Australia, and this is important, and I'll explain why in a second. Australia is the same size as the continental United States, with the population of New York. So because our population is centered, and the community's population is centered in the capital cities, the assimilation has been far less pronounced. Our intermarriage is only about 60% only, that's in inverted commas. And because geographically we are so concentrated, essentially Sydney, Melbourne, and Canberra, the triangle, in the southeast corner of the country. That would account for maybe 90% of the population of our community in the whole country. We've been able to retain a lot more of our community institutions, particularly the ethnotopiki, the regional brotherhoods and things have survived a lot better. And Mr. Tamvakis would know this, having visited here, must be over a decade ago now. And we actually met at the Cyprus Community Club, but on your sole visit to Australia a long time ago. So this transition is not as pronounced in Australia. Give it another decade, it will be. The first Hellenes arrived here that we are confirmed, 1829. And I mention this specifically because they were Palikaria to Ikosiana. They were freedom fighters in the War of Independence who were arrested by the British and convicted of piracy and sentenced to transportation. This is what the British did in the 1800s. They dumped their unwanted prisoners, not in England or somewhere else in the UK, but they dumped them in the colonies, particularly in the various Australian colonies. Unlike the United States, which had the War of Independence of its own, Australia simply became, through an act of Parliament of the British Parliament. It just one day it didn't exist. And on the 1st of January 1901, it suddenly was its own country. So while there are parallels, there are also great differences. We did not have our own citizenship. Australia did not have its own citizenship until 1947. We were British citizens until 1947. And do not underestimate how important that role is, even today. The Britishness. Many of our people, many of our community, particularly from Cyprus, came on British passports. Mm-hmm. So they were already citizens when they arrived, unlike the ones from Greece or from Vought-Epiro. And some of our most prominent businessmen in Australia were, well, they've passed away, Vought-Epirotes. Particularly the Stamoulis family in Melbourne is what I'm thinking of. Whereas, I'm not sure, I saw the declining membership, the declining attendance at church, particularly in the last 2 years, with the election of the new Archbishop, His Eminence Archbishop Makarios, there has been quite an uptake, an increase in activity around the Archdiocese. And I'll give you one classic example. This year, with the bicentenary, the Archdiocese formed a national committee, His Eminence formed a national committee to coordinate events for the celebration of the bicentenary across the country. We started in September last year with a trisagio and an event at the grave of one of those Palikaria who came here in 1829. It's about 100 kilometers from Sydney. And it will conclude in December. This whole 15-month period of celebrations is almost 300 events. Gives you an idea about the strength of the community groups in Australia, coordinated by the Archdiocese. The Archdiocese is, while some people may dispute this, it is the preeminent institution of our community in Australia. And the fact that it was outside SAE, essentially for its entire history, the entire history of SAE, was a massive issue for Australia. This was the decision primarily of the late Archbishop Stylianos, for various reasons I don't have time to go into. The new Archbishop, His Eminence Makarios, we're not sure what his position is going to be regarding SAE. I don't think he's formed an opinion yet. He's only been here in June. It will be 2 years since his arrival. So he's still quite new and still finding his feet very much. SAE in Australia, and when we say Oceania in the Far East, we are essentially talking about Australia. New Zealand only has a few thousand Greeks left. Most of them have migrated to Australia. And the rest of the Far East is, while there's a substantial Orthodox community, there are very few ethnic Hellenes living in places like Korea and Japan and the Pacific Islands. while there is a substantial Orthodox community, there is an archdiocese metropolis of Korea, which runs most of the Far East from our perspective. There is a metropolis in Hong Kong and a metropolis in Singapore. But as I said, the 95% of the population that we're talking about relating to SAE in Australia deals with Australia. Unfortunately, SAE in Australia is dominated by these ethnotopiki silogi, these regional brotherhoods, who are increasingly irrelevant in daily life. Beyond commemorative events around the liberation of the Ionian Islands or the Dodecanesa, or now in March, the various parts of Peloponneso, they really play no role in the community. And yet, I don't know how it is in the States, but yet they have substantial financial assets which are locked away in bricks and mortar. Our community, not only personally, but our community wealth is far disproportionate to our numbers. In Australia, declared Hellenes, we're looking at maybe 450, maybe 500,000. The next census is actually due at the end of your summer in August. So that'll give us a better understanding. We've had some recent migration with the crisis in Greece. It's, I would say, no more than 20 to 30,000 people. And again, just like with the United States, the vast majority are Australian-born or married to Australian-born who have brought their families. A number of them have already returned to Hellas. They could not adjust to the differences here. And I don't know, again, I'm saying I don't know a lot, but the differences between American life and life in Hellas in Greece, I suspect are quite substantial, so they are with here. And one of the big issues that they present is the difference in attitudes created by the climate. They are used to what they identify. The ones who come here identify summer with July and August, but summer is December and January. To kalokeri, the holiday period. It sounds petty, but the mentality that develops, your mind is around that the summer holidays is the end of the year, not the middle of the year. So I had a conversation last night, my time, with someone in Greece. And I said, if I'm lucky, the Australian government will open the borders. With COVID, our borders have basically been closed for 15 months. There are Australians who cannot get into the country because of quarantine laws, which the Australian government enforces very strictly, and I'm talking about very strictly. To come to Australia, you need to stay in quarantine for 15 days and have all sorts of COVID tests before you're allowed into the community. It's the main reason we've stayed COVID-free effectively. That I said, if we're lucky, I'll see you in Christmas in December in Greece. He goes, it's a whole year away. The mentality, the attitude, the way we look at time is completely different. And this is something that with SAE and the way it's not only set up, but also the attitude about ipsifos apodimon, the vote. The very fact that you call us apodimi, I personally find insulting. I'm not an apodimo. I was born and raised here. My daughter is born and raised here. My wife is born and raised here. Yet we're all citizens. I've gone through the process, unlike the horror stories we heard before. It only took me a couple of years to go through the process of collecting the paperwork needed to secure Greek citizenship. So if I was in my chorio in outside Yanina, we could vote like anybody else. But because I'm in Sydney and there's no way I'm going to be able to get to Greece, and this is why I keep bringing up the issue of climate and the time of the year. The elections in Greece are generally around spring and summer, which is the middle of our work year. So there's no way I can get there. It's very difficult to get there when you consider that the journey is over 24 hours for us. Not just the flights, but the flights you're about 20 hours in the air. so west coast of United States, they would understand what we go through just to get to the Χωριό. The fact that we're not allowed to vote here at the, we have a consulate general here in Sydney, and a very active one. We cannot simply go there. Like last month, the Bulgarians had a general election. Bulgarian citizens in Australia simply went to, they don't have a consulate general, but they went to the embassy in Canberra, or they went to an allocated place, and they voted. The Skopjani do the same. The Italians do the same. The French, pretty much everybody in Europe, not just European Union, but everybody in Europe has this right. The postal ballot. Australia does. I can be in Athens during an Australian election and vote at the Australian embassy in Athens. But I don't have that right here as a Greek citizen in Australia. And that is really, really irritating. And for me, the biggest issue with the biggest failing of this legislation is that point. The lack of an epistoliki ψήφο, the lack of a postal ballot. I pay taxes in Greece. I own property in Greece. I visit every time I can, which lately has been pretty much every year, except for last year with COVID when the Australian government wouldn't let me out, and probably won't let me out until maybe October, November. So I have all the responsibilities of a Greek citizen, of a politi, and yet I'm denied the basic right of being able to be elected and being able to vote.
Not anymore.
Yeah, well, no, somebody's talking. We'll get to that in a second. Go ahead, please, Panayiotis.
Okay, the not anymore. I'm glad you brought it up. Because I have not lived in Greece for 2 years in the last 35, by the way, I'm only 50 years old, I'm denied. Even though, as I said, I pay taxes, I file my tax returns in Greece, I own property in Greece, but I don't have, because I have not lived there, this arbitrary number of 35 years, which I believe was quite deliberate to exclude the generation of migrants pre-1980s, which is a good chunk of the active community here in Australia. This is a real issue. The new migrants have no problem with this. They are quite able to vote. And I bet you that when the time comes, they won't. Don't expect more than 10 or 12,000 votes to come out of Australia with a population, as I said, a Hellenic population of 450, maybe 500,000. Τα κουκιά είναι μετρημένα, as we say in Greece, and this is one of the reasons that all the parties, not blaming Nea Demokratia or Syriza or any of them, all of them together do not want a particularly strong role of the diaspora, of the Hellenes outside the borders of the Greek state, to be too involved with the politics there. They cannot control us. They do not know how many of us are active. I can tell you that in the Australian community, 80% of us are not born in Greece, if not more. We have large communities, and Tamvakis, you'd know this, a large community of Greek Egyptians, maybe 40,000. Big community of South African Greeks who have left South Africa and moved here, particularly in Perth and in Sydney. So, and a lot of these people are not from the Greek state. A lot of them are from Imvro and Tenedo. We do have a substantial number of Constantinopolites. Amongst our Pontian community, there is a substantial number who came directly from the Soviet Union back in the day. So all these people are excluded by this legislation. And I think I've spoken enough. I'll let Marina have her turn.
Thank you, Panayiotis. Marina already jumped on board, quite frankly. She couldn't hold herself back. I mean, the reality, listen, we'll discuss that later in the question and answer period. Okay, this, was I introduced as a sort of like a psychological scenario while they're giving it to you on the voting side, and even though in Monday. Okay, they approved in the parliament, people being able to vote abroad. As you indicated, there's an issue there, as you pointed out. I will say that in terms of the weather and all the rest of that, I do have relatives, many relatives actually, in Australia, besides obviously Canada, besides Europe, besides in the mainland of the Hellenic Republic. We'll go that into the question and answer period, but now I'll introduce Dr. Marina Frangos, who introduced herself in a way, as she insisted that you were incorrect, that you could vote, but in fact you couldn't. Marina was born in New Jersey, and her grandparents, listen to this, Nico, and her grandparents and three great-grandparents emigrated to the United States in the early 20th century. She is a Rutgers University graduate in biochemistry, having spent considerable time in Athens, where she had prior attended Hellenic Public School. She moved to Hellas permanently in 1994 and became involved in the World Council of Hellenes Abroad since its inception. She served as the organization's first director at the Thessaloniki headquarters under the presidency of Andrew Athens. In 2002, she received a scholarship from the Hellenic Republic to complete her PhD in geography, with her dissertation on the Hellenic diaspora. Marina has taught diaspora history and European cultural studies at the Hellenic Open University and has published numerous articles on related issues. She has worked in the tourism industry in the past 2 decades and was the translator of Theo Halou's Not Even My Name, for which she received the prestigious Translation Award from the Association of Hellenic Literary Translators. Welcome, Marina, and your turn now.
Okay, thank you very much. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to the previous speakers. We got an overview of the new legislation for SAE from Mr. Tamvakis, who I worked very closely with in the past. And then we heard from Mr. Alexiou, who spoke to us about the Greek American community. And of course, Mr. Diamadis, who gave us an overview of the Greek Australian situation. This fora, this webinar is about the new legislation on SAE and how it relates to the communities we mentioned. But we don't only have these communities, we also have a lot of communities in the former Soviet Union. We have a lot of communities in Europe. And that's why my PhD was about the variety, the varied diasporas that we have in the Greek case. And it's one of the rare diasporas that has all types of diasporas, namely trade, labor, cultural. We even have the victim diaspora that was mentioned before. And we have the recent diaspora of the brain drain. We have a lot of academia having left Greece in the past 10 years, close to 500,000. So let's widen the scope a little bit and let's talk about what other countries do in relation to their diasporic institutions. 50 years ago, the word diaspora was not used as often as it is today. Primarily, it was used for the Jewish communities and even the Greek and Armenian communities. But today, if you Google the word diaspora, you get tens of thousands of returns. So everybody seems to have a diaspora these days. As far as the state institutions for their diasporas are concerned, again, we started out ahead of the game. In the 1980s, there were only 15 states, 15 countries that had established formal diaspora entities, either a ministry dedicated to the diaspora or an actual representative institution. We founded the General Secretariat for Greeks Abroad in 1983, and the other countries that had proceeded with an equivalent institution were Argentina, China, Cyprus, France, Germany, Israel, Italy, Japan, Lebanon, Pakistan, the Philippines, Portugal, San Marino, and surprisingly, Yemen. Then we proceeded as the General Secretariat for Greeks Abroad was a state institution. So it was primarily a government service. established to fulfill the needs of the migrant communities. In 1995, we got SAE. SAE was the institution representing the organizations. Now, that was a problem because it only included organizations and not individual Hellenes abroad. By that time, the countries with diasporic institutions had risen to 22. So 22 other countries have their equivalent SAEs. In 2000, we had 41 countries that had their equivalent SAEs. Do you know the number of countries that today have an equivalent SAE? It's 118 countries out of the 193 United Nations member states. That's an incredible number, which shows that there's a shift in focus. It means that more countries are interested in establishing ties with their diasporas. So we started out ahead of the game. We had the General Secretariat for Greeks Abroad in 1983, then SAE in 1995, and then suddenly, because of the crisis or after the crisis or for other reasons, after 2008, or basically for sure after 2012, we stopped having the SAE. What happened? I've heard that in the late 1990s, we shared our know-how with the Italians, who were looking to create more rigorous diasporic institutions and to facilitate the diaspora voting. Today, the Italians are way ahead of us. They not only have diasporic institutions in Italy, their own SAE, but they also have elected members in the Italian parliament, okay? So something happened with us, and we must tie this in with the other recent legislation, and I didn't mean to interrupt my beloved Mr. Diamadis, but there is now legislation allowing the diasporic vote, voted in 2019, and it has a few restrictions that are a bit odd. I don't disagree with him, but I don't see any other way of this happening. You must have some restrictions. You can't have just anybody of Greek descent voting for Greek matters. I think everybody agrees with that. I think other countries also have restrictions. So let's look at the legislation that was just passed last month. What is happening? First of all, you have a drastic reduction of the number of delegates. There were, in the first SAE in 1995, that was a very emotional, very nice experience for all of us, because for the first time we had Greeks from the Soviet Union meeting up with Greeks from Argentina, with Greeks from the States, with Greeks from, I don't know, South Africa, from Egypt. It was an extraordinary experience, okay? But we had, at that time, we had 300 delegates, close to 300 delegates. Now the Greek state is coming and saying, okay, I'm reducing that number to 50. That's a drastic reduction. But basically the main change is that the Greek government now says, okay, the ball is in your court, diaspora. You have the resources, you have the know-how, you figure it out yourself. You figure it out how to elect SAE members. You're going to figure out what the form of the regional organizations is going to be. You're going to figure out the rules and regulations, and you're also going to find funds. And I want to be optimistic. I believe in the Greek diaspora. I think they could do it themselves, and they could do it better. We have all these wonderful organizations. We have the Hellenic American Leadership Council. We have the Hellenic Initiative. We have the Hellenic Innovation Network in Boston. We have all kinds of new types of organizations, social media groups. It doesn't have to be the old-fashioned, ethnic organizations or the Greek communities of yesteryear. It could be leveraging the power of all these new players. And I think what the diaspora has to do is they have to take it upon themselves and say, okay, I'm not going to let this opportunity pass me by. It's a great opportunity. The Greek state is saying, okay, do it yourself. I mean, that was the main complaint. I've written very critical articles about SAE, and the main issue was that it was controlled by the government. That was the main complaint. And now the Greek state is saying, okay, you do it yourselves. You decide, apart from the number of delegates, which is just 50 now, you're going to decide when to hold the general assemblies, how to fund yourselves, what your rules and regulations are going to be, who you're going to invite, what the agenda is going to be. I think it's a great opportunity. I don't know, it's going to be difficult in the beginning because we're going to have to figure out like how this is going to happen, what organizations are going to participate, who the players are going to be, how we're going to support the poorer communities. We have the wealthy USA, the wealthy Canadians. We also have destitute communities like the Greek community in Georgia or in Albania. These issues have to be addressed, but we have the resources and the world has changed. Everybody is looking to engage their diasporas. And we, as a historic diaspora, cannot let this opportunity pass us by. We can say more in the discussion.
Thank you, Marina. Part of the reason why we're having this discussion is because at least in America, at least in our Hellenic diaspora, let's say here, it wasn't discussed at all, quite frankly. In other words, it didn't appear in any newspapers. There was no dialogue of any kind. I was talking to Nico, obviously, and you can unmute yourself, Nico. I was talking to Nico, and he was saying at that time when we were speaking, which wasn't long ago because it passed at the end of February, the legislation was being discussed. No one was discussing it anywhere, and then we turned around and quite frankly, it was approved. My first question, and if we all can be brief, my first question is why at this time, and why was there no discussion publicly within these various communities, even though we all know, or some of us know, that there was discussions between different Hellenic politicians and actual people within the diaspora, which we're not going to name because this is a rhetorical discussion, and with people in many people's opinions who do not represent the diaspora at all. In fact, it's people in the Hellenic Republic speaking to people who have no clue about their own diaspora, have no power within their own diaspora, but in the meanwhile, they're creating an importance, and more relevantly, they're creating trouble within the diaspora and fights within the diaspora for leadership roles in different organizations so they can be the so-called representatives of these organizations. And in other words, this is causing tremendous trouble that started a few months ago, quite frankly, when these discussions were taking place. So my question, again, very simply, to everyone, and we'll start with Stefano if we can, is, and we'll go in the order, is why at this time, and why was there not a more transparent discussion about this, so voices can be heard, so we can have a dialogue and really get the people we have to get together to form this type of organization. I think it's a positive. I think it's great to form this type of organization. My question, though, is a little bit different, and it started off in a bad foot, in my personal opinion. Stefano, your thoughts on this? And you can speak in Greek, English, whatever you like.
Well, actually, nobody was. We didn't know about the new law. Πώς θα γινόταν το ΣΑΕ, τι θα γινόταν.
But γιατί δεν μιλήσανε στη διασπορά, να έχουν transparent.
Δεν ξέρω, αυτό είναι κάτι το οποίο και εμένα με προβλημάτισε πάρα πολύ. Θεωρώ ότι δεν έγινε διάλογος με τη διασπορά καθόλου. Αποφασίστηκε αυτός ο νόμος για τη διασπορά, ερήμην της διασποράς. Βεβαίως, όπως είπε και η Μαρίνα και συμφωνώ, είναι challenge και είναι αμαρτία να το αφήσουμε να φύγει από τα χέρια μας αυτή τη στιγμή. Θεωρώ ότι πρέπει να το παλέψουμε, τουλάχιστον να προωθήσουμε την νεολαία να παλέψει, με την πείρα που έχουμε εμείς, να είμαστε δίπλα στην νεολαία και να μπορέσει η νεολαία να το κρατήσει στα χέρια και εμείς σας κρατήσουμε το κομμάτι του οικονομικού, το founding, to find the sources of founding this new endeavor, και αυτό θα είναι πάρα πολύ καλό. Δηλαδή, εάν εμείς έχουμε την πείρα να μπορέσουμε να βρούμε αυτοχρηματοδότηση για το Συμβούλιο Απόδημου Ελληνισμού, για το νέο Συμβούλιο Απόδημου Ελληνισμού και προωθήσουμε την νεολαία, θεωρώ ότι αυτό που είπατε όλοι σας και τελευταία η Μαρίνα, είναι ότι είναι κάτι το οποίο δεν πρέπει να φύγει από τα χέρια μας.
I totally agree. Nico? Why now, Nico? And why the way it happened?
There are many different reasons, Lou. Of course, there are political reasons behind it. First of all,
can you speak louder, Nico? Συγγνώμη, μπορείς να μιλήσεις?
Είναι πάρα πολλοί λόγοι. Σίγουρα είναι και κυρίως πολιτικοί λόγοι. Ένας λόγος είναι ότι το θέμα της ψήφου απέκλεισε τη μεγάλη πλειοψηφία των ομογενών. Όπως πολύ σωστά ακούσαμε και πριν από τον Παναγιώτη και από άλλους. Άρα λοιπόν αυτός ο κόσμος που αποκλείστηκε από την ψήφο θα πρέπει να βρει έναν άλλο τρόπο, an alternative to make them feel happy, so they can be advisors. You have SAE to have an advisory role, so it's not all that bad. Maybe you cannot vote from your place of residency, but at least you can have some kind of interference. So this is one thing to ease the pain.
So you're saying it's like a diversion to the actual discussion.
This is one part. The other part, it is a genuine. I find something very genuine that the Greek state finally wants to deal seriously with the Greeks abroad. The only problem is that they don't know how. This is the problem. So on one hand, you have some signs of willingness, but on the other hand, they don't know, because all these years, and I am directly in disagreement with what Marina said, that they all did the same thing. They are all in the same PASOK, Nea Demokratia, Syria. They are not all the same. We have to have an evaluation of responsibilities and see that all these years, since the establishment of the Greek state and the governments that were there, basically the right wing and PASOK, that they had no shame at all to book massively aeroplanes. You remember them if you are here in Rakes, and send people from New York and everywhere for free to Greece to vote, and instead of developing the institutions. So because we lost so much time in developing the institutions and the bridges between the Greek state and the Greeks abroad, now they want to do it. They realize that it is a time to do it because of what we all said, socioeconomic improvement, know-how in many. We are the Greeks in the States and everywhere in most places. They have high skills, they have high knowledge, so the Greek state needs them. So they realize that we force them of the achievements we had where we live. We force the Greek state finally to realize that they need seriously, but they don't know how. So the only thing that they recognize, it is the old Ottoman way, the millet system. They recognize the church all these years. Now we need time as Greeks abroad to develop our own institutions. The Greek American community, they don't know itself. There is, in all schools, they don't teach anything about Greek American history. We don't know. I have students at Queen's College, which is a public institution, and every year has 1,000 students out of the 20 of Greek background, and they don't know one Greek American poet. They don't know one Greek American painter. And they went through Greek American schools the church schools, basically. So you see, if we don't know our own history, because we never had, we were always Greek-centered, how are we going to develop those institutions? And also, we don't see it only in our high schools and elementary school. We see it also in the universities, including Rutgers. Since Marina went there, in New York there are 5 other Greek studies programs. Queen's College has one, NYU has one, Columbia has one, Stony Brook now, and Rutgers with the elitist Edra, I think, right? It is the elitist Edra. No one is dealing with Greek American literature. They only focus on Greek poetry and literature, which is fine, but you cannot exclude the history and the traditions and the culture of the Greek American community. So, because it is too late, they want to do it so fast without really knowing how. So it has to be some kind of, as you said, to start with an open dialogue to see who are the interested members within the Greeks abroad. And I'm talking only, I know only the Greeks here in America, to realize who we are and what we want to do. But someone has to be the force, the leading force, and we have to decide that. And I hope today's meeting, you know, it is a beginning to start forming the form that this panel, this new institution, new form of collectivity, to start the dialogue and bring all the various players who are not necessarily belong to the Ομοσπονδίες, to the Ethnotopiki Sylogi, etc.
Panayiotis, why now, and why not a discussion with the diaspora before it took place? Why wasn't there a dialogue and an outreach to have a discussion about the various issues in your mind?
I couldn't agree with Dr. Alexiou more than I do. They do not, the Greek state, okay, το ελλαδικό κράτος, does not know how to deal with us. They just don't know. It's really simple. And I believe...
Is it they don't know? Is it they don't know?
Don't. You've dealt enough with the Greek bureaucrats to understand they barely know how to deal with their own people inside the country.
Then how come they're reaching out for certain people? How come they're reaching out for certain people?
That's why I think one of the catalysts for why now is the election of Mitsotakis. Yeah. He has experience of life outside the country. As a student, as an adult, as a developing politician. So, but
if he was outside in the diaspora, he knows there's an open dialogue. Not he, forget about him, because this is not political discussion, by the way, because many of us are. Yeah, but I will say this. Why no open discussion with the diaspora if you're going to pass legislation relating to the diaspora? Why? I'm just curious.
Really simple. They don't see us as being that important.
That's a good answer.
The decision makers, the parliamentarians, except for when they have, and Marina's going to probably challenge me again, the decision makers, except the ones that actually bother doing tours outside. We used to, pre-COVID, would regularly get visits from parliamentarians from both Cyprus and from Athens. Except for that very small handful of the 300, I think no more than 5 or 6 have actually visited Australia. And they only come to Australia either because they're sent here for various national anniversaries or national events, or because they have family ties and come for a family wedding or a funeral, or have personal relationships with individuals here. Because I'm not sure about Western Europe, Egypt, or the States, but here the political parties in Greece do have active branches, as in topikes, oργανώσεις. They operate, they function. All the political parties, Kokoe, Syriza, PASOK, /Κίνημα Αλλαγής, and Νέα Δημοκρατία, they all have branches here in Australia. Multiple branches in the capital cities. Okay, to various extents. So in Australia, at least, they have even less excuse for not discussing draft legislation with us. Apart from a few isolated articles in our print media, which, let's be honest, are only read by people above 70 years old, και κάποιοι γραφικοί σαν και εμένα, there was no dialogue. The SAE in Australia, Oceania, did have, because by law they're registered in Australia, by law they have to have an annual general meeting. They have had annual general meetings, but you look at the photographs. I haven't been to one in many years, but you look at the photographs of those who attended. The average age is 75. They almost exclusively represent one of these ethnotopικές οργανώσεις, these regional brotherhoods. Do not deal with the broader community. The Archdiocese is absent. My biggest problem with the old SAE was the exclusion of the sporting clubs. Again, I don't know about the United States, but the sporting clubs in Australia are some of the biggest and most and broadest organizations of our community. They don't look at where your parents are from or where you're from or your grandparents are from. Are you interested in football? Well, you guys in the States call it soccer. Are you interested in some other sport? And their complete exclusion was a big issue. Why now? I agree with Marina that because of the internet, the web, governments across the world, and in our part of the world, particularly the Chinese government, is very interested in using their diaspora communities to promote their interests. Again, I agree with Marina again. We were in front, as in the Greek state was in front, and it completely dropped the ball. And the crisis is an excuse. I can tell you that SAE in Australia was in deep, deep trouble pretty much from the beginning.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Marina, why not an open discussion? And why, unmute yourself, Marina. Why not an open discussion? It would have been greater, by the way, to have an open discussion and really, to Stefanos's point, and the type of things that he had promoted as the way it should happen, we could have had that dialogue. But meanwhile, there was no open discussion. There was outreach to people from these different groups, let's say, that they knew, as Panayiotis indicated. And at least in the American scene, it's caused like some problematic issues taking place that have appeared in the newspapers for no reason at all, except the way they did it. Because the people that they talk to do not represent the diaspora. Marina.
It's an issue. It's a big problem. I think it was hastily passed, and it was pretty easy legislation as well. I mean, every other article is SAE will decide. SAE will decide on its own. SAE will decide this and SAE will decide that. Why it happened now? I think I agree with the previous speakers. Number one, because of Mitsotakis and his, well, I think that he recognizes the potential of this, of these resources, and also the challenges of our times. We're already late. But why it happened the way it did, I don't know. But on the other hand, let's focus on what we're going to do. Let us not allow that to pass up this opportunity.
No, I totally agree with you, Stefano. Let me ask you a question, because your heart, your heart and our hearts are in the same place. In other words, we all want to do the right thing and put together an organization that will last for generations. One of the issues that you had mentioned, obviously, when you were talking about the legislation, had to do with self-financing.
Yes.
In your mind, and by the way, don't answer the question right away. Just say what you were going to say. But to the question after you say what you're going to say is, how do you view, or what do you think in terms of how this thing is put together from a financial point of view? But please respond to some of the other things that you were going to respond to.
Αυτό που ήθελα να πω είναι γιατί τώρα το ΣΑΕ, γιατί αυτή τη στιγμή το ΣΑΕ, γιατί έγινε όπως έγινε αυτή τη στιγμή με αυτό το νόμο, γιατί δεν ερωτήθηκε η διασπορά, nobody was questioned, why not an open dialogue, όλα αυτά θεωρώ ότι το ΣΑΕ είναι συνταγματικά κατοχυρωμένο. Σύμφωνα με το Σύνταγμα, είναι μέσα στο Σύνταγμα του κράτους. Δεν μπορεί καμία κυβέρνηση να το σταματήσει το ΣΑΕ. Άρα αναγκαστικά όποιος και να ήταν η κυβέρνηση έχει πιεστεί να το συνεχίσει το ΣΑΕ. Δεν είναι θέμα προσώπων που στα ξαφνικά κάποια πρόσωπα συγκινήθηκαν και θυμήθηκαν τους απόδημους. Καθόλου. Είναι ότι ήταν αναγκασμένοι να αναβιώσουν το ΣΑΕ. Γιατί είναι συνταγματικά κατοχυρωμένο μέσα στο Σύνταγμα της Ελλάδας.
But why not the dialogue? Why not the dialogue?
Ως συμβουλευτικό και γνωμοδοτικό όργανο. Γιατί όχι διάλογο? Γιατί κάνανε ένα ΣΑΕ το οποίο, όπως είπατε και εσείς όλοι, ρίξαν το μπαλάκι σε εμάς. Σου λέει τώρα, εντάξει, νομίζουν ότι δεν υπάρχουν ευαίσθητοι Έλληνες, νομίζουν ότι δεν υπάρχουν ευαισθησίες και ότι θα το αφήσω με αυτό το, επειδή δεν είναι οικονομικά εξαρτημένο, δεν θα ασχοληθούμε. Εγώ νομίζω το αντίθετο. Νομίζω ότι δίνει ένα κίνητρο αυτή τη στιγμή στον απόδημο ελληνισμό, στον σκεπτόμενο απόδημο ελληνισμό, ο οποίος δεν είναι επαγγελματίας απόδημος, είναι απόδημος γιατί του αρέσει να είναι απόδημος και να βοηθάει το έθνος του, την πατρίδα του, να συγκροτηθεί και να μπορέσει να το φτιάξει αυτό τον οργανισμό. Οι οικονομικοί πόροι, Λου, νομίζω ότι εκεί πρέπει να γίνει μια μεγάλη συζήτηση. Υπάρχουν από ιδιώτες, από πατριώτες, από ιδρύματα, υπάρχουν πόροι, θα βρεθούν πόροι. Οι κοινότητες, οι ομοσπονδίες. Δεν είναι θέμα το να μεταφερθεί ένας Έλληνας, να ταξιδέψει, ένας Έλληνας από την Αλεξάνδρεια να έρθει στην Ελλάδα ή από την Αμερική. Καταλαβαίνω, η Αυστρία είναι μακριά, έχω πάει 8 φορές, 5 φορές και ήταν αξέχαστα τα ταξίδια μου και ο ελληνισμός εκεί, αλλά είναι αποστάσεις. Αλλά βεβαίως και είναι αποστάσεις, καταλαβαίνω απόλυτα. Αλλά δεν είναι το θέμα εκεί. Νομίζω ότι αν ευαισθησιοποιηθούμε εμείς και μπορέσουμε να οργανωθούμε και θελήσουμε να φτιάξουμε κάτι στην Ελλάδα, να γίνει κάτι στην Ελλάδα, στη Θεσσαλονίκη, που οπωσδήποτε πρέπει να είναι και η βάση, δεν νομίζω ότι η κυβέρνηση ή οποιαδήποτε κυβέρνηση θα μείνει αμέτωχη. Όχι ότι θα ζητήσουμε προς Θεού, αλλά δεν θα μείνει αμέτωχη, άμα δει εμείς να οργανωθούμε. Και αυτό πρέπει να κάνουμε. Αυτό πρέπει να είναι το επόμενο βήμα.
Listen, there's no doubt in my mind that we can't get together, okay, with these different communities.
Exactly.
There's no doubt in my mind at all, quite frankly, especially with the technologies that we have right now, especially even to get the young people involved the way we should. Let me ask you another question, because you brought this up when you were talking about the new legislation. They talked about 30 initial representatives from at least 4 regions. How are these 30 representatives decided, Stefano? How are these 30 representatives decided? How does this come together?
This is another question that we have to clear. It's not very clear, unfortunately. But it says that when 4 regions are ready to be organized, okay, then we can go on with the rest of SAE. So how you can organize, this is a question to be discussed, is a matter of discussion. Πρέπει να υπάρχει ένας τρόπος αυτοοργάνωσης και να υπάρχουν rules πάνω στο θέμα της οργάνωσης. Ο νόμος αναφέρει ότι μπορεί να υπάρχουν representatives από όλο το φάσμα του ελληνισμού και δεν περιορίζεται σε κοινότητες και σε ομοσπονδίες, σε συλλόγους, σωματεία κτλ. Οπότε αυτό θέλει μια διευκρίνηση νομική, η οποία ακόμα δεν νομίζω να υπάρχει αυτή τη στιγμή.
Is the government involved in that initial process or no?
No.
Okay, so if let's say we're just making this up, right? This is just hypothetical. If you decide that you're going to represent with others in your community in, let's say, Northern Africa, etc. We talk to Panayiotis, he has his own community, this and that, and he sets up his group. We talk with Professor Alexiou, etc. We set up our group in the United States. And then we get another group, let's say in Canada, with different representatives, etc. Can we set it up ourselves?
Yes, in a kind of, yes.
Nico, what do you think about that? Go ahead.
Αλλά όχι από, yeah, I know what you mean.
What's not, yeah.
No, let's say we form these groups. Let's say we raise the money. Let's say we said, you know what, this is great. We'll go to Thessaloniki. We'll have some offices. So does this legislation allows people like us, assuming that we represent somebody, to form this organization?
You have to have a rule. Να πρέπει να υπάρχει ένα σύστημα, ένα πλαίσιο το οποίο να σου επιτρέπει να μπορείς να οργανωθείς. Αυτό χρειάζεται να υπάρχει.
All right. So my question is the government involved in that at all?
No.
Okay. All right. This is very interesting. Nico, your thoughts on the conversation?
Το που είπα και πριν, ότι we don't have the experience in the political organizations. The Greek state at some point has to be involved because it is the concept of legitimation to recognize. So if you and I and two other people form that SAE, say we are the SAE. So we need this legitimation process that the Greek state recognizes.
We have to be recognized by the Greek state.
Therefore, it has to be an open election. That's why we say that it has to be a collectivity to start the process and have an open invitation to the various community. So this is a long-term process. It's not that we do it in the next month or next year. So it needs a lot of discussions, a lot of open dialogues of different, and of course, people need to know first. The first thing is that people need to know. We have to bring the word out. And this is the first official announcement of all this in homogenia, at least for the states. So it is a long-term process. So if we set up a plan, a 2-year plan, a 3-year plan, we need to start immediately.
But who's the we? Who's the we? My question is, who's the we?
Αυτό που πρέπει
No, Stefano, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Αυτό που πρέπει είναι ότι οι ίδιες οι οργανώσεις πρέπει να αποφασίσουν με δικό τους εσωτερικές διαδικασίες την οργάνωση, την αυτοδιοργάνωση. Δηλαδή οι ίδιες οι οργανώσεις. Και βεβαίως περιορίζεται η εκπροσώπηση αυτών των οργανώσεων σε κάθε ήπειρο, όπως σας είπα και πριν, 2 λεπτά, ας πούμε, πάραμε τον Καναδά. Ο Καναδάς έχει 6 representatives. Άρα θα πρέπει the organization of, λέω τώρα τυχαία του Καναδά, ένα παράδειγμα φέρνω, ας πάρω την Αφρική καλύτερα, από εκεί που προέρχομαι, η περιοχή δική μου δηλαδή για να οργανωθεί έχει 5 εκπροσώπους. Άρα θα πρέπει εμείς στην Αφρική και στη Μέση Ανατολή να οργανωθούμε, να καλέσουμε τις οργανώσεις μας, τους συλλόγους μας, τις αντιπροσωπείες μας, τη νεολαία μας, τους επιστήμονες, να κάνουμε και να φτιάξουμε έναν εσωτερικό κανονισμό δικό μας και να εκλέξουμε 5 εκπροσώπους. Τότε είμαστε έτοιμοι ως περιπέτεια. Θα μπορέσουμε λοιπόν να πάρουμε μέρος στο νέο Συμβούλιο Απόδημου Ελληνισμού. Το ίδιο πρέπει να κάνουν και οι άλλες περιπέτειες. Δεν έρχεται δηλαδή το κράτος να σου πει θα εκπροσωπούνται οι πρωτοβάθμιες, οι δευτεροβάθμιες, οι τριτοβάθμιες οργανώσεις. Όχι. Σου λέει, εσείς οργανωθείτε με όποιους εκπροσώπους νομίζετε που θέλετε εσείς να έχετε μέσα σε αυτό που λέγεται περιφέρειά σας. Δημιουργήστε την περιφέρειά σας όπως εσείς θέλετε. Δεν είναι αυτοί που δεν παίζουν πλέον ρόλο οι πρωτοβάθμιες, επαναλαμβάνω, δευτεροβάθμιες, τριτοβάθμιες οργανώσεις. Όχι. Είναι πιο ελεύθερα τα πράγματα και πιο μοντέρνα, μπορώ να πω, και πιο ευέλικτα και πιο αντιπροσωπευτικά, κάτι που το ΣΑΕ κατηγορήθηκε, η Μαρίνα θα το θυμάται, και ο Παναγιώτης, ότι δεν ήταν αντιπροσωπευτικό, ότι δεν αντιπροσώπευε την ομογένεια, ότι αυτοί που εκπροσωπούσαν το ΣΑΕ δεν ήταν απόλυτα αυτοί που εκπροσωπούσαν την ομογένεια. Ερχόμαστε λοιπόν τώρα και σαν οργανώσεις πρέπει να βρούμε τον τρόπο, σαν περιφέρειες με συγχωρείτε, να βρούμε τον τρόπο να είμαστε πιο αντιπροσωπευτικοί ως προς τον απανταχού ελληνισμό. Ευχαριστώ.
Panayiotis, let me ask you a question based on what Stefano just said. It becomes complicated. Obviously, you mentioned the type of organizations that exist in Australia, etc. Can you guys ever get this thing together to create your own group to join the SAE? I'm talking about Australia now.
Yeah.
Can you do it?
Most definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Most definitely. As I said, a SAE already exists. It's small. It's basically not funded. It's effectively Sydney and Melbourne, but it's a start. Is it perfect? Far from it, but it is a start, which means that the will exists in Australia for this dialogue, for this interaction with the Greek state to exist.
So the existing SAE there in Australia is representative of the diaspora of Australia?
No.
So that's not it.
But it's a start.
But at least they have a structure. They have a structure.
They do have a structure. It's a start. It's not perfect. It's far from perfect.
No,
it's far from representative.
Yes.
Because as I've said a number of times, the Archdiocese is by far the biggest and best organized of our community organizations. It is literally the only organization of our community that is truly national, that has a presence in all our states and all our territories. It is the only one. And the crippling of SAE in Australia and Oceania generally has been the absence of the Archdiocese. How do we solve that issue? Well, that again requires dialogue with His Eminence and with the Archdiocese Council. But SAE in Australia and Oceania will never work properly without the Archdiocese.
Well, that may exist perhaps in Australia because of perhaps the strength of the Archdiocese. But as Nico said earlier, you have people that go to church, you have people that don't go to church. So, the Archdiocese is certainly the largest Hellenic American organization. On the civil side, it's obviously a HEPA, and there's other organizations, involved. But let me go to Marina. Marina, in terms of this particular discussion, and since you do come from America, what are your thoughts, with regards to what was stated by Stefano and by Panayiotis relating to the ability to do this, at least in the United States?
I think it's going to be difficult. I mean, the United States started out with close to 100 members, 100 delegates in the first SAE, something like 87, I think it was. And now they have to go down to 10. I don't know how that can happen. It's a difficult thing, but they have to find some way of being representative, inclusive. It's not going to be easy. And because of the diversity in the United States, I think it's going to be more difficult for the states. I think the states will be the greatest challenge. I think it's easier for this to happen for Africa and the Middle East, or even Germany, where they have a more unitary form. They have a lot of communities and they don't have the diversity of types of organizations. In the States, we have all kinds of organizations. We have churches, we have the federations, we have professional organizations, we have individual players, we have businessmen. So it's going to be difficult, and there has to be leadership. Somebody has to step forward and say, you know, we just can't let this opportunity pass us by, and we have to do something.
But typically in the United States, because you know the United States, and you can jump in on this, the people who are going to jump forward, you know, are not going to represent, quite frankly. People are going to say they do not represent us, because some of these people, they you know, maybe some people on Alas think they represent us, but we know differently. Nico, what's your thought on this, on representation in the U.S.?
And you see how I ended my presentation, right? That anything goes, nobody and everybody. So what is the concept of this? Is that, first of all, it is very tricky what the Greek government does and what this new legislation does. Oh, it's up to you. You deal it. No, it's not like this. You need someone from the Greek part to have a dialogue. Somebody has to be accountable. Somebody has to be there to have this dialogue. What we do in collaboration, in some kind, as I said, consensus, compromises, and public dialogue with the Greek state, a representative of the Greek state. This Pontius Pilatus is a very fishy business. So it is like telling the Greeks abroad, you find a way, leave us out. Come and tell us what happened. It's not like that. You need a serious player, a constitutional elected representative in Greece to deal with this. That's why I said it's a long term. It has to be in stages. The first thing, Greece has to have a committee, and the states must have, at least for the beginning, an ad hoc committee to inform the people, to decide who are those 10 representatives from the states. It's going to be proportionate according to population. Is all 10 from New York? Is all 10 from the East Coast? Is nobody from the Midwest? How are you going to allocate those 10 representatives? It has to be a dialogue with the Greek state, the ad hoc committee, and the ad hoc committee here. It is the criteria. We must set up the criteria. It is population. It is history. How long you live. So we must set up the criteria. So do it yourself. It is not a good policy. So,
but let's assume that do it yourself, you know, made sense. Okay, and I don't necessarily. No. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. But no, I understand. But let me say this: when they say, you know, it's all up to you, but it's not all up to us, because the legislation was theirs. It was their legislation. In other words, when we talked about 10 representatives from the U.S., for example, when we just discussed earlier that the population, depending on your definitions of Hellenic Americans, could be anywhere from 1 to 3 million. Okay, and you're saying that you get only 10 representatives, whereas in South America, which the population of Hellenic Americans is just about nothing, okay, and compare it then and just say you're going to double in the United States, it's like a ridiculous conversation. So what I'm saying is, Nico, is the state has put itself in the process, created the issue. So how do you get into a situation where you're going to create a SAE where you have, for example, 1 to 3 million people, maybe 3 million max, okay? And you say that somebody across the river has 5 representatives or 9 representatives, or in South America 5 representatives, which makes no sense to anybody with any logic.
So if you permit me, a proposal is that to have a dialogue among the Greeks abroad, and we make suggestions to alter the existing legislation. What is our own different regions to some ad hoc committees to start making proposals to change the existing legislation. What do we see? What is our vision about this? So we have to have our agenda of how we view it, and we start from there. Definitely, we need to have some reconstruction of the latest pathetic legislation. This is the first step.
All right, we're gonna have some closing remarks if we can. We'll go one by one. Obviously, this will be the first of a series of dialogues that we'll have with relating to the diaspora. And I think what we should do also going forward, Nico, is maybe we have different events where we actually reach out and speak to the different people of the diaspora just to get a feel for their communities, because I think it would be great, quite frankly, to just start talking to other communities. We haven't done that, but certainly we'd like to talk to the Hellenes in Russia and obviously in Alexandria and other places. It would be very nice, and we can do a whole series on this as everyone is discussing how to put together SAE, etc., which I think conceptually is fantastic. I'm not sure if the way it was set up was that great, but it's a good thing, and I think we should promote it. So if you can, some closing remarks, Stefano?
I think για μένα είναι ένα challenge, για όλους μας είναι ένα challenge το νέο ΣΑΕ. Έχει όμως και τα προβλήματά του. Το μεγαλύτερο πρόβλημα είναι ότι εάν δεν σηκωθούν η νεολαία, η νέα γενιά, οι άνθρωποι, οι νέοι που θέλουν να προσφέρουν και τραβηχτούν πίσω, τότε φοβάμαι ότι θα γίνει πάλι μια επανάληψη ενός παλιού ΣΑΕ και δεν θα αξίζει τον κόπο καν να συζητάμε.
Thank you for that, Stefano. And to your point, the neolea, and then other people with financial resources to help the scenario. I think you also mentioned that, which
Yes,
I think is going to, which I think is going to be very
Of
important to help out. Nico, final comments, Nico.
So, as I said, the first thing is to inform people. So both the various communities abroad have to do it within themselves, and also the specific legitimate representatives of the Greek state must have a presence and talk about it, to have an open, to start the dialogue. We need to have a dialogue with the Greek state, even in that late hour, at this late hour. We must have a dialogue with elected representatives who are accountable to inform the communities. The first few months has to be an information and dissemination of what the legislation visions, and of course we have to have our own agendas, starting developing what we want. Yes.
Thank you, Nico. Panayiotis, how's the weather there, by the way? But Panayiotis, some closing remarks.
How's the weather? I don't.
you haven't been out.
As you can see behind me, it's still pitch dark. It'll be dawn in about an hour. Look, as an educator as well as a teacher, I agree with Nico. It's all about education, particularly not so much the migrant generation or the septuagenarians and upwards, particularly the Australian born who are now, we're getting into the 4th, 5th generation, who beyond a lot of them not even a Greek name, don't associate very much, don't have direct links with Hellenism. So educating our own people about what do they want to see out of this organization. This is the key, in my opinion. And I think the bicentenary is the amazing opportunity to start this dialogue amongst ourselves with each other, particularly with the Pontians, the various communities around the Black Sea and further inland into Russia and Ukraine, but also with the center, with Athens. It was only announced a few hours ago, but next Thursday evening, 25 Martiu, of course, you all must get onto your social media. Everybody knows the Sydney Opera House. The Sydney Opera House is going to be painted, well, digitally painted. It's going to be projected in the Greek flag.
Really?
in honor of Independence Day.
Very nice.
It was only announced literally a few hours ago.
Oh, yeah.
So get onto the social media and take a look at it. I'm going to make you guys jealous now. I'm going to be down there looking at it live. So congratulations on this initiative. This is the only way. This sort of talking to each other is the only way. And the real obstacle is going to be talking with the Greek state. This amorphous mass of bureaucrats and politicians.
Thank you, Panayiotis. Marina, some closing remarks?
I feel the same. In other words, I think what I miss the most about being in the States is this pride that I felt for being Greek. And I think that's what we have to focus on. Get the kids to feel proud, let them have a vision. May it be the 25th of March or the Olympic Games or something that will mobilize the youth, the universal Hellenic values that are also global values. I think we can do it. And maybe we should just forget about the Greek state for a little while and then go back to them with specific proposals and specific ideas about how to do this. Education is the main thing, and raising awareness, and that's why congratulations on your initiative, because that's what's lacking. I believe you when you say that most people don't even know about SAE, even after so many years. So the first thing is to teach them about it and then get them involved.
Thank you, Marina. I will say that, and I know this for a fact, at least in the country that I'm in, there's a tremendous ethnic identification with the Hellenic Republic. There's no doubt. And as a matter of fact, study after study, including by Moskos, who had written about the Greeks in America, and also his son, who did the third edition of the book, indicated that as an ethnic group, Hellenes, more than any other ethnic group in the United States of America, regardless of generation, when you ask them what they are, who they are, besides saying, let's say they're American, is they say that they're Greeks. And this doesn't matter whether there's intermarriage or anything of that nature. It really doesn't. In terms of intermarriage, that's just an excuse. Okay, we all know that Alexander, stated specifically to his army members to marry non-Hellenes to spread the Hellenic culture. We know that for a fact. Okay, we also know, Marina. I hate to look at you and talk about you personally, but we all know, in particular, about your background. Your 4 of your grandparents, 3 of your great-grandparents came to the United States in the beginning of the 20th century, and here you are, fluent in the Hellenic language, et cetera, et cetera. So the excuse that generations and people forget their language and things of that nature has to do more with getting the pride, being involved with the Hellenic Republic, and then wanting yourself to start being taught the Hellenic language. Many in the United States, when they originally came, because of certain biases that were taking place, their parents insisted in many cases that they speak the English language, And many of them obviously forgot the English language after a while. Other people had issues with the Hellenic language because they went to speak the Hellenic language. And then you had Hellenes that were criticizing them in front of other people and saying that they don't speak the Hellenic language. And they basically reverted back not to speaking the Hellenic language. I think, quite frankly, and I'm glad we're all together and we're going to continue these dialogues. I think there's a tremendous opportunity. And one of the, actually, to link up with each other, and also for those who do not speak the Hellenic language, and I think Nico will have a separate thing on the Hellenic language itself, because I don't like the way it's projected by some people who are pushing the Hellenic language without understanding what's going on, because they should push it a different way, not an aggressive way to say, you are not a Hellene because you don't speak the Hellenic language. Your mother and father may be Hellenes, but you are not a Hellene? What is that all about? I don't get it. So we have to have these conversations, quite frankly. For the audience, thank you for being here. We will continue this dialogue. I think we'll start a series of the diaspora, and we'll go into the communities and start talking to people just to talk to each other and get different perspectives. This is obviously live right now, but for the audience, this tape and the other tapes you can get at YouTube. Just go to EMBCA.com for our website, and on YouTube it's EMBCA, and subscribe. Subscribe to our channel. There's no cost or anything of that nature. Thank you all. You are a fantastic, fantastic panelists, and let's continue this discussion. Thank you again. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Hasta καλά.
Thank you.
Again.
Kalimera Panayiotis.